Hey guys, my name is Naga, welcome to the channel. Today I have a really mysterious story for you guys, so be sure to stick around and find out. But before we get into that, if you like what you see, drop a like, subscribe and click the bell icon so that you don't miss anything. I'll also leave the link in the description to my Twitch channel where I stream every weekday and Saturdays from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern Time. But without losing any more time, let's get right into today's story. Okay, so in January 1959, 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov led a group of 8 Soviet hikers. Now, these were mostly college students, and it was 7 men and 2 women, including Dyatlov, and they were going into a hiking trip into the Ural Mountains. Now, their objective was to reach Mount Ortorten from a small village called Vizai. Truth be told that they left in this trip, and it took more than 3 months to locate all of their bodies. The bodies were found about 6 miles away from their destination, in a forest almost a mile away from their campsite. Now this is where the mystery begins, because we're talking about a group of extremely experienced hikers. And when the bodies were found, they didn't have their skis, they didn't have their shoes, they didn't have their coats. And we're talking about a weather of approximately minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. 2 of the hikers had fractured skulls, 2 more had major chest fractures, and 1 hiker was missing her tongue. Now, in good Soviet manner, the investigators described the deaths as natural cause and closed the case not even a month later. Now, here's what we know about the incident, okay? 6 of the hikers died of hypothermia, okay? 3 died of injuries, and they all died separately. Now, 2 of them were found under a cedar tree near the remains of a fire, while 3 others were found in intervals of hundreds of feet from the tree, and 4 more were in a ravine another 250 feet away. Now, this keeps getting weirder and weirder, guys. Listen. The 2 bodies that were under the tree had burned hands. The 4 bodies in the ravine weren't found until May 4. Now, this is 3 months after the incident. Then the investigators found out that the dead donated their clothing to the living. So they found Ludmila Dubinina's foot was wrapped in a piece of Yuri Skrivonishenko's pants, while Semyon was found wearing Dubinina's hat and coat, and some other garments had cuts in them, as though they were forcibly removed. So this case keeps getting weirder and weirder the more the investigators keep digging on it. So consistently there were 8 or 9 sets of footprints in the snow, accounting only for the skiers and not suggesting another party's involvement. Well, at least on foot. There was no sign of struggle or of any other human or animal approaching the campsite. There was no snowstorm the night of February the 2nd, which is when it was determined via their diaries that they died. Their campsite was made on the slopes of that mountain, at about 3,600 feet. All of the travelers, 8 of them in their early to mid-20s and 1 of them, Zolotaryov, in his late 30s, were experienced mountaineers, having skied across frozen lakes and totally uninhabited areas to get there. And now here's the part that it gets really weird, okay? So despite the nasty weather and the slower progress than they anticipated, their last diary entrance was in high spirits. Charmingly, in a very typical Soviet way of bonding, they even produced a little newspaper about the trip, which they titled The Evening Ortoten, in which bore the headline, "From now on, we know that the snowmen exist." It goes on to say, "They can be met in the northern Urals, next to Ortoten Mountain." They were, it's tough, probably joking, referring to themselves. So, after the first 5 bodies were found, the legal inquest began, okay, eventually determining that the cause of death was hypothermia. The deaths all seemed quite straightforward at the beginning. And now you guys can say, straightforward? And I know, sure. These dead in various stages of undress, including one in his underwear, was a little bit weird. But this can easily be explained using paradoxal undressing. Now, paradoxal undressing happens in about 25% of victims of hypothermia. And it happens when the hypothalamus malfunctions and body temperature seems to rise when it's really dropping. So you get super hot and you feel the need to undress to cool down. But here's where it gets weirder, okay? So the investigators found out that the skiers' tents had been cut, okay? But the weird part is that they had been cut from the inside, with all their gear still inside. So why would we find the skiers' bodies farther from the tent, naked or with no equipment, when they obviously cut out their tent, escaped from the tent, leaving all their equipment behind. So to all appearances, they appear to have left the tent in a really hurry. And bizarrely, Zolotaryov fled the camp with his camera, but not his gear. So if that doesn't scream weird and suspicious, I don't know what does. Another weird fact about this incident, which it's all weird, let's be honest, is that Solobodin, along with Dyatlov and another skier, seem to have died in a pose indicating that they were trying to get back to the tent. Rustam had a little crack on his skull, but ultimately it was ruled that the elements killed him, not the fracture. And even though his skull was fractured, no external wounds were found whatsoever. So whatever cracked the skull didn't leave a mark on the outside of his head. So if up until now things were not weird enough, things got really shaken up when the 4 bodies in the ravine were examined. So both Dubinina and Zolotarev had fractured ribs, while Nikolai had major skull fracture. Okay, one investigators actually said that the extent of these fractures were the same as a car crash. It would be impossible for another human being to cause this in any way. And once again, no soft tissue damage was observed. That means that externally, at first sight, they had no damages whatsoever. When Dubinina was found to be missing her tongue, the question of whether or not the third party had anything to do with it rose again, of course. Or even if another skier took her tongue. But if they did, why, to where, and how? Because there were no indications of a fight, there were no external marks, as I said before, there were no visible damages to anything except for the internal, as if their bodies were crushed by pressure, which at 3,600 feet above sea level just doesn't happen. And perhaps the most baffling of everything, some of the skiers' clothes appear to have been exposed to radiation. In the end, and due to an absence of a guilty party, the inquest was closed in May of 1959, only a few short weeks after the whole thing happened and the bodies were discovered. The files were archived and classified and only became accessible towards the end of the Soviet era in the 1990s, and even when they did, some parts were still missing. Now, without any real public answers to any of these freaky questions, all matter insane theory flourished around the incident over the ensuing 50 years, and the fact that the Soviet government just closed the case so abruptly also rose questions to a number of theories. Some people say that they saw glowing orange orbs in the night of the incident, other people say that that's all just a nuclear test site. Anyway, after 50 years it's still a big mystery and still nobody knows what happened to these hikers, and up until now it's known as the Dyatlov incident. Alright guys, that was the video. I hope you guys liked it. If you watched this far, thank you so much. Leave a comment below what you think actually happened to these hikers and what you would like to hear me talk about next. Anyway guys, have a good week and I'll see you guys next week.